Asanteni sana. Asanteni sana, University of Dar es Salaam Cultural Group. Professor John Owusu Gyapong, Secretary General, African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA. Professor William Manangise, Vice Chancellor, University of Dar es Salaam. Esteemed Vice Chancellors from Tanzanian universities present here. Members of diplomatic corporations and international organizations. Professor Nelson Boniface, Deputy Vice Chancellor Research from the University of Dar es Salaam. Deputy Vice Chancellors from the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, members universities. Professor Saudin Mwakaje, Distinguished Guest Speaker of the 3rd Annual Distinguished Public Lecture of the African Research Universities Alliance. Principals, Deans, and Directors, distinguished guests, professors, faculty members, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the University of Dar es Salaam, I wish to warmly welcome you to this important public lecture of our very own. We are delighted to have you here, and thank you very much for setting time to join us. My name is Amda George. I'm from the Communication and Marketing Unit of the University of Dar es Salaam. I'll be your host for today. Ladies and gentlemen, to go straight to the agenda of today, to begin, I have the honor of welcoming Professor Nelson Boniface, Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Research of the University of Dar es Salaam, to give introductory remarks. Karibu sana, Professor.
Professor William Manangise, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Dar es Salaam, Professor John Gyapong, the ARUA Secretary General. Please allow me to say that the protocol is observed. Nawasalimia katika Jamhuri ya Muungano, kwa jina la Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. We thank God for granting us this moment. It is my honor, on behalf of the University of Dar es Salaam, to offer these 4 words on this special 3rd ARUA Annual Public Lecture, which was preceded by the annual meeting of the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the ARUA. This dual occasion reflects ARUA's noble agenda of building Africa's research capacity, positioning our institutions to be globally competitive, and most importantly, equipping us to finding lasting solutions to the development and the challenges of our continent. I'd like to inform you, Vice Chancellor, and all the guests, that yesterday we had a meeting of the Deputy Vice Chancellors from all across Africa, those who are ARUA members, that we were discussing, deliberating the agenda of the ARUA, which is actually anchored on making sure that our universities and the continents, they have solutions for our continent. The delegation was led by Professor John Gyapong, the ARUA Secretary General. I'd like to introduce him to this public. Please stand up so that people can recognize you. And the Deputy Vice Chancellor from South Africa, please stand up, all of you together. From South Africa. Deputy Vice Chancellors from West Africa, please stand up and wave. from East Africa and Central. So the ARUA has about 20 member universities, and yesterday we had an attendance of about 16. Others had some issues that they could not attend physically. And today's event, we have physical attendance, and there are those who are attending virtually, online. I'd like to inform you that as you see the gathering here, this period of the year, the university is at the low season, or I could say people are out at the university because we are supervising our students in practical training and industrial training. So most of the staff and the students are not around, but they are following the event virtually. After these remarks, I would like to thank the efforts done by the organizing committee that was led by Dr. Agustina, our Director for Internationalization, and the entire team. So everything that is happening, it was under her leadership. And I want to applaud the cultural group that you saw here this evening. Those are our gifted students, led by Dr. Dines Sanga, head of the Department of Creative Arts. Please stand up, people recognize you. And after these remarks, I would like to invite the Vice Chancellor to give the welcoming note to all the guests. Thank you for your kind attention.
Professor John Owusu Gyapong, Secretary General, African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, esteemed Vice Chancellors from Tanzanian universities present here today, members of the diplomatic corps and international organizations, Professor Nelson Boniface, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, University of Salaam, Deputy Vice Chancellors from the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, member universities, Professor Saudin Mwakaje, Distinguished Guest Speaker of the 3rd Annual Distinguished Public Lecture of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, Principals, Deans, and Directors, distinguished guests, professors, faculty members, and students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the University of Dar es Salaam for this very special occasion. It is a great honor to host members of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, for the 3rd Annual Distinguished Public Lecture. This event underscores our strong commitment to intellectual exchange and international collaboration. With the utmost humility, I extend a warm welcome to everyone present, both those attending in person and those joining us virtually. I sincerely commend the commitment of the ARUA Deputy Vice Chancellors for Research from the member universities, whose dedication made yesterday's meeting both fruitful and very inspiring. Special appreciation goes to our own Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Professor Boniface Nelson, who ably hosted the meeting, and we are grateful for this productive engagement. We also extend our gratitude to ARUA for selecting us as this year's host and for giving us the privilege of welcoming our distinguished speaker, Professor Saudin Mwakaje, Associate Professor of Law and Chief Corporate Counsel, who will share his insights on intellectual property rights, a subject that lies at the heart of academic governance and research integrity. Allow me also to recognize and extend a warm welcome to the Vice Chancellors of Tanzanian universities and other colleagues from nearby institutions who have honored us with their participation in this esteemed event. We value your presence and encourage your universities to consider joining ARUA so that you too can contribute to and benefit from this strong continental research network. The University of Dar es Salaam is proud to be the sole ARUA member from Tanzania, together with the other sister institutions in Central and Eastern Africa, Makerere University, University of Nairobi, University of Rwanda, Addis Ababa University, and the University of Kinshasa, an associate member. As many of you know, ARUA supports African-led research by fostering interdisciplinary collaboration, promoting equitable resource distribution, and advancing progressive research policy. Membership opens the door to joint research initiatives, capacity building, knowledge sharing, increased access to research funding, and stronger international partnerships. Such engagement strengthens institutional research capacity, attracts talented scholars, and helps our universities contribute more effectively to national and international development. Dear participants, the goals of ARUA are in harmony with the Tanzanian's Development Vision 2050 and our university's Vision 2061. These commitments are already integrated into a strategic plan. The University of Dar es Salaam has reaped significant benefits from ARUA membership, including 1, enhanced research capacity through joint projects, strengthened international collaboration networks, increased opportunities for competitive funding, improved access to shared expertise and innovation platforms, and practical solutions to pressing challenges such as climate change and public health. Moreover, ARUA's initiatives have directly enabled us to strengthen our ICT systems, expand research infrastructure, and build faculty and student research capacities. These contributions have enriched not only our university community, but also our wider society. Ladies and gentlemen, I once again warmly welcome all our distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and members of the public to this important lecture. I encourage you to engage actively, ask thoughtful questions, and make the most of this learning opportunity. Finally, I invite our guests from outside Tanzania to extend your stay to experience the beauty of our country, from the historic wonders of Zanzibar to our newly opened University of Dar es Salaam Museum, which showcases 6 decades of our rich history and contributions. Let us seize this occasion to build stronger partnerships, advance knowledge, and shape a brighter future for Africa through research and collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. I would like now to welcome again Professor Nelson Boniface to recognize our new guests who just arrived. Karibu.
Vice Chancellor, please allow me to recognize two guests. Major General Ibunge, this is the Commandant, National Defense College. Mpigie makofi mengi sana. I'd like to also recognize Commissioner Meela, who is representing Commissioner Mambosasa, this Representative Police College Kurasini. Karibuni sana, tunashukuru kwa kuja. Asante sana. And now, according to our timetable, it's my honor to welcome Professor Bola to do the... I'm sorry. Okay. The timetable now is to welcome Professor John Gipong, Secretary General from ARUA, for remarks from ARUA. Please, the stage is yours.
Vice Chancellor, Professor William Anisije, Vice Chancellors from other universities here in Tanzania, esteemed military commanders, Deputy Vice Chancellors from ARUA institutions, and if I may say, all other protocols observed. It is indeed a pleasure for us to be here and have this public lecture. ARUA is excited about the active participation of University of Dar es Salaam, and we do not take it for granted. Vice Chancellor, we are very grateful. And we want to acknowledge the immense organizational skills of your able Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Nelson Boniface, and his team for organizing this for us. We are indeed very grateful. And everybody, I believe, has been very happy with what has happened so far. It is an honor and indeed a privilege that the University of Dar es Salaam is hosting the third ARUA annual lecture. As many of you would know, the annual lectures were instituted to stimulate discussions on very important issues, to ensure that as academics involved in research, we engage one another on things that are topical, but also broaden our discourse in academia. The first public lecture was delivered in 2023 in South Africa. It was delivered by one of our able academics in the person of Professor Salaam Abdul Karim, who espoused a lot of experience and information on the HIV/AIDS pandemic and COVID as well. So he captioned his talk, "The Pandemic of Two Cities." That is referring to both HIV/AIDS and COVID. Through this lecture, he demonstrated the research that he has done over the years to let us know that here within Africa, we can take the lead in addressing our own health challenges. The second lecture was delivered by Professor Fumi Olusikan, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor from King's College, a professor of Nigerian origins. She also espoused for us the whole environment of our commitment to higher education space and how we can collaborate to work together as ARUA institutions and beyond. Today, we are excited that University of Dar es Salaam is giving us a very reputable individual who I believe will be introduced appropriately. But permit me to say that reading his bio, I was pretty much impressed with his work that he has done so far in the field of intellectual property rights, which is very relevant for us whose main focus is research. We are very much eager to hear what he has to share with us, and we would have a discussion after that. Through these initiatives, ARUA is able to bring so many academics to a common place, physically and more importantly, virtually, to ensure that the discourse on very relevant issues continue. As academics, we debate issues, we disagree, and find a common ground, and then eventually chart a pathway to address our challenges here in Africa. It is my sincere hope and belief that through this lecture, we will be able to have some insights into how to manage our IP issues in our various universities, and beyond that, affect the development of our countries and our continent in general. That our knowledge that we generate as academics would benefit us as a continent and lead to innovations and development within the African continent. With these few words, I wish to express ARUA's gratitude to all of you for making yourself available to participate in this public lecture. And it is our hope and prayer that it will be a melting pot of very, very relevant information for our development. I thank you all for your attention.
Another round of applause for Professor John Gyapong. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an honor to welcome Professor Bolanle Obu to read or present citation of our distinguished guest speaker, as Professor John Gyapong said, reputable, Professor Saudin Jacob Mwakaje. Karibu.
Yeah, citation for Professor Saudin Jacob Mwakaje. Please, I would want him to be upstanding on the stage. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We are deeply honored to present today's keynote speaker at the 3rd Annual Distinguished Lecture of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, Professor Saudin Jacob Mwakaje, PhD, an accomplished legal scholar, policy advisor, intellectual property expert and authority, and an advocate whose academic and professional contributions have significantly shaped not only Tanzania's legal landscape and includes Africa as a whole in the broader IP intellectual property ecosystem. Professor Saudin Mwakaje is currently an associate professor of law at the University of Salaam School of Law, where he lectures and conducts research in the Department of Economic Law. His areas of academic and professional specialty encompasses intellectual property rights, investment law, capital markets and securities, corporate governance, with a focus on regional legal integration and development. He holds several advanced degrees, including a PhD in law from the University of Dar es Salaam and a Master's of Laws, LLM, in Intellectual Property, Commerce and Technology from the Franklin Pierce Law Center, University of New Hampshire, United States of America. This was earned through a prestigious World Intellectual Property Organization Fellowship. He also has a Bachelor of Laws and another Master of Laws from the University of Dar es Salaam. His extensive career covers public service, academia, legal practice, and consulting. He has served as the Chief Corporate Counsel and Secretary to the Council of the University of Dar es Salaam from 2017 to present, overseeing legal advisory roles and governance of Tanzania's oldest and most prestigious university. He is also an experienced legal practitioner, admitted as an advocate of the High Court of Tanzania and Zanzibar. He is a founding partner of Next Law Advocates, a Tanzanian-based law firm specializing in corporate law, intellectual property law, capital markets, and international business transactions. He manages a portfolio of local and international clients representing well-known brands as their regional trademark infringement and enforcement representative. Professor Mwakaje is a recognized thought leader in intellectual property in Africa and is listed as an expert on intellectual property by the World Intellectual Property Organization and the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. He has played pivotal roles in both national and international initiatives to strengthen the IP frameworks and institutional capacities of various countries and organizations. He is currently a member of the National Steering Committee for formulating the National Intellectual Property Policy and Strategy for Tanzania. In this role, he provides guidance on aligning the national IP system with broader development goals, technological innovation, and the digital economy. Between 2006 and 2009, he served as the Intellectual Property Coordinator for the University Science, Humanities, and Engineering Partnerships in Africa program, a Pan-African initiative involving 8 universities across East and Southern Africa, hosted by the University of Cape Town. His efforts led to developing and implementing institutional intellectual property policies for various universities, which includes the University of Dar es Salaam, University of Botswana, University of Nairobi, University of Cape Town, the University of Zambia, the University of Zimbabwe, the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, and Makerere University, Uganda. Internationally, he has maintained a consistent and influential partnership with the World Intellectual Property Organization, and he served as the mission representative in 2013 when he was tasked with developing a model teaching curriculum on intellectual property law for universities in Liberia. He is a tutor and instructor in various World Intellectual Property Organization courses under the World Intellectual Property Academy based in Geneva, Switzerland. He has been an expert involved in training and capacity building for small and medium-sized enterprises across multiple countries, including Ethiopia, Nigeria, Uganda, Botswana, and Tanzania. Through these training sessions, Professor Mwakaje has empowered hundreds of SME owners and entrepreneurs with the knowledge and tools to protect their innovations and leverage IP assets for business growth and sustainability. In the regional integration space, he has made significant contributions to the African Union, particularly in the African Continental Free Trade Area AfCFTA. He served as a legal consultant during the technical review of the draft annexes on trademarks and industrial designs under the AfCFTA Intellectual Property Rights Protocol. His advisory input during the Phase 2 negotiations, supported by the East African Community and the GIZ, was instrumental in aligning regional IP laws with the objective of AfCFTA's protocol for inclusive trade, innovation, and technology transfer. He has authored and co-authored numerous peer-reviewed publications, policy briefs, and legal commentaries. He has served as consultant to the Tanzania Commission for Universities on a lot of assignments. He is a sought-after speaker and has delivered keynote address papers at conferences hosted by the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization, the World Intellectual Property Organization, the International Trademark Association, the African Union, and recently he gave a keynote address titled African Regional Integration Efforts and Intellectual Property Law, Opportunities in Recent Developments, during the 18th cohort inauguration of the Masters in Intellectual Property program at Africa University, Zimbabwe, held just a few weeks ago on the 18th of August, 2025. He has given keynote addresses in Nigeria, in Dar es Salaam, in Cape Town, and in programs by the World Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva. In recognition of his expertise and integrity, he holds several high-profile governance positions, including chairman of the board of directors of the National Arts Council of Tanzania, where he offers strategic directives to the growing creative industry, in which intellectual property rights play a pivotal role. He is also a board member of the Tanzanian Telecoms Corporation, reflecting his broader interest in digital innovation and information governance. He is an accredited arbitrator in Tanzanian mainland and has handled high-stakes legal disputes in corporate trade and intellectual property law. Additionally, he is a member of the International Trademark Association, the Tanganyika Law Society, and the East African Law Society. Professor Mwakaje's international leadership has led and has not only contributed to legal reforms and governance excellence, but also uplifted Africa's global standing in matters of innovation, trade, and intellectual property management. His integrated vision, combining academic rigor, policy impact, and legal practice, exemplifies the values that ARUA stands for: research excellence, knowledge equity, and transformative leadership. As we gather here today, it is fitting that we honor and celebrate a scholar, a reformer, a continental thinker whose work continues to shape the legal features of Tanzania and the African continent. Please join me as we welcome Professor Saudin Jacob Mwakaje, PhD, the 2025 ARUA Distinguished Lecturer. Thank you.
At some point, I wanted to ask Professor Obo to stop. But it is what it is. Thank you very much for such a generous citation. Secondly, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation. That is a honor and a profound privilege to stand before this distinguished gathering. And I would like to thank ARUA and the University of Dar es Salaam management also to invite me to have this opportunity to engage with the audience on this very important subject in the context of research, innovation, and also knowledge exchange. I would like to point out that despite what may seem to be an illustrious career track, I'm still a work in progress. And for obvious reasons, because intellectual property is a subject which is evolving, quite transformative. The dictates of the day, given the fact that technology keeps on changing over and over again, it necessitates also intellectual property to align, realign, and in some cases to recalibrate in order to address the changing societal needs. Allow me also to preface my lecture with two important caveats or precautions. Despite my experience in intellectual property and the engagement of intellectual property across Africa, just a little while ago I was talking to my good professor from Ibadan, Madam, that I had quite a good time in Ibadan and Ife, OAU, when we engaged with these two institutions in Nigeria in terms of intellectual property management some 10 years ago. In South Africa, we have strong presence through the Ushapia project, which was done way back in 2006 to 2009. So despite this experience, I would like to forewarn you that the options which I may present in terms of what should be done in the context of the universities in Africa and research management and intellectual property may not be an outright solution to your institution. What you're supposed to do is to realign, recalibrate, and look at the institutional specific context and how you can apply the ideas and concepts which you are going to discuss. So at the end of the day, I may not give you solution, rather areas of further inquiry. So if I create more controversy, that is also my objective. I'll equally achieve my objective if you leave here with some sort of controversies. But at the end of the day, we are going to share what is considered to be an interesting subject. As Representative ARUA pointed out, this is a subject which is intertwined with the research management and university operations. So if we take a little time, a few minutes to reflect on the theme today, when we talk about the interface of intellectual property and the research management, the two standout concepts come out, research management and intellectual property. Why are we talking about this aspect at this particular time? For obvious reasons. We are living in an interesting era or time zone where our time or epoch is invariably referred to as a knowledge-based society. You have heard about this terminology, information society, knowledge-based economy, in which ideas, innovations, and intellectual property assets serves as the new currency in shaping societal development. We may have our resources, natural resources, but we need creative idea to be able to exploit it to the advantage of our respective countries or communities. And that's why we are talking about the role of knowledge in the contemporary economies. There are two interesting literature which I normally like to engage with and read. One is by Thomas Cotter. It is entitled Patent Wars. Patent Wars. How patents impact our daily lives. You've heard about institutions or corporations fighting for patents like Samsung, Apple. A little we take interest to appreciate or dig in what exactly are they fighting for. Actually, what they fight for is not intellectual property. It's not patents. They are fighting for market control. So Thomas Cotter points out that in some cases, subconsciously, we make decisions based on intellectual property. Little we know that how this affects our decision at the individual level, institutional level, and national level. Let me illustrate one point at the individual level. When you go out and you want to buy a product, let's say it's a mobile phone handset, what is the decision-making process that you engage with before you decide to buy a particular brand? Is it spontaneous? Or you make a decision at home? Normally, you associate yourself with certain brands. You trust certain brands. And you are prepared to wait to buy a product if that brand is not in the market. And why do you trust certain brands or products? It's because of its functionality. We call it the technical features, the functional aspect, or the anticipation of satisfaction that we'll get from a particular brand or a product. And when you talk about functionality and technical features, these are issues of innovation, patents. So this is the reason when you talk about intellectual property and patents, trademarks, we're talking about an area or a subject which is cross-cutting, is influencing decision-making process at individual, institutional, national, and now we talk at the continental level in Africa where the discussion on intellectual property is taking an interesting shape. Another writer, John Hawkins, has written about the creative economy, how people make money from ideas. Creative economy. I normally like to point out this simple example about how ideas, creative ideas, can translate into business and revenue. Some of us have taken Uber, right? Or we have shopped through Alibaba. This is a market platform. Uber is a network of transportation. But little you realize, Uber, which is listed in some of the credible stock exchange, is just an idea, a platform, which is now joining these tax owners to believe into the system, and me and you, we trust on the system because of the credibility of that idea, of that creative idea that it communicates to each one of us. So what's the point? Now, with a creative idea, one can generate wealth. One can generate financial returns out of it. And it's not a surprise, maybe, the owner of Uber system or software, you may not be surprised that he doesn't own even a single tax. But he's having this network of millions of tax service providers working for him because of a creative idea. And this is the point which is brought forward by John Hawkins, that we are living in a creative economy. And we can give dozens of examples, on and on, which indicate that with a creative idea, one will be able to make money or transform the fortunes or create wealth. But when we look at Africa, and in the context of universities, it's important also we reflect where the continent, particularly the African Union, AU, where is it heading in terms of the continental economy? And for this, I would like to refer to AU Agenda 2063. I would assume we know the aspirations, seven aspirations of the AU Agenda 2063. If you take time and reflect on the AU Agenda 2063, you'll come to realize all of them, explicitly or implicitly, they attract engagement with intellectual property in order to move with the flagship agenda, the Africa we want. As part of implementation of the AU Agenda 2063, AU moved on to sign an agreement which we call Continental Free Trade Area. And we academicians here, we don't like to talk about trade, but trade is affecting the future of our institutions. And we've got to find a way through which our universities may also play a decisive role in shaping the ongoing continental initiative, particularly the landscape of trade, the landscape of innovation, the landscape of research in Africa. When you read the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area instruments, starting with the agreement and the protocol, and interestingly in 2023, just 2 years ago, it adopted a protocol on intellectual property. And there is explicit mention of universities, research institutions, and collaboration in order to make Africa competitive. We've mentioned about some of the brands who are fighting for patent control. We would like also to see African trader, through innovation, through what we call university-industry linkage, also create what we call a competitive edge, and they're able to compete in the growing market of Africa, where we have about 1.4 billion people. So this is the aspiration of the AU in terms of transforming Africa, the Africa we want, where there is a defined role of academic institutions, defined role of researchers, in terms of creating new solutions, innovating new ideas that will be instrumental in terms of giving Africa a competitive edge. So in this context, where the message is quite loud and clear from Africa Union that innovation is the driving force of progress and competitiveness, it's important we take time to reflect on intellectual property engagement with research institutions, and in particular, universities. But before we do that, let's look a little bit at some statistics. And I've drawn these statistics from a very recent report from the World Intellectual Property Organization. We have the World Intellectual Property Indicators. Now, in 2023, a total number of 3.5, close to 6 million patents applications were registered worldwide. Remember, I mentioned earlier that when you talk about patents, we are talking about market control. It's not about just protecting an innovative idea. We're talking about market control. So 3.5 million patents application globally in 2023. Now, that was an increment of about 2.7% compared to year-to-year comparison. Now, what is striking to us should be the concentration of the patent landscape across the globe. 70% were filings in Asia patent offices, and leading offices, patent offices, included China. China registered a total of 1.6 million patents. I repeat, 1.6 million patents. And they had this project way back in 2010 where they had a project that by 2020 we want to achieve what we call 1 million patents a year. 1 million patents a year. And now they are hitting the target, 1.6 million patents per year. What does this translate in terms of the knowledge control, ownership, and the global domination? The second one in the global ranking was US. When you check on US, the filings were almost 1/3 of China filings. No wonder you see US is worried about China. Because we're talking about control of technical information, which translate now into the market. And I'm drawing these statistics. In the context of Africa, they can be a bit depressing because we don't have what you call a proper presence when it comes to the knowledge control and innovation. Now, if you translate this into the economics, well, US is still leading because the GDP of US is 30 trillion US dollar, the GDP of US. Next to US is China, 18 trillion GDP. How about Africa? Combined Africa is 3 trillion GDP. That's combined GDP of the entire African continent. Recently I had the discussion debating about the size of Africa, the geographical size of Africa. But we've got other issues also to contend with, including how we generate wealth, how innovation plays a role in terms of generating value and wealth out of the abundance of resources that Africa is currently having. So when you look at Africa now, research contribution, R&D, according to reports, it's 0.8 of GDP versus world minimum threshold of 1.9% of the GDP. So we still have some grounds to cover in terms of how we translate our research into usable products, giving competitiveness of the products which are produced in Africa. The more we invest in research, the more we engage with intellectual property, then we add value to these products. Most of the product that we buy, and we tend to be loyal to the brands, have been nurtured for years through innovation, quality control, and these are the issues which we would like our universities and research also to focus on. In addition to what we see from the statistics, we also see what we call a regulatory change in Africa. I've mentioned about the adoption of the AFCFTA protocol on intellectual property, which was adopted in February 2023, which presents a major opportunity for cross-border trade and innovation there is a distinct chapter dealing with innovation, research, and also collaboration. And this is the theme and the aspiration of ARUA as well, in terms of increasing research collaboration amongst universities in Africa. So as African universities, our challenge, given the statistics that we have, given the regulatory change in terms of the landscape in Africa, our challenge is both urgent and I would say also transformative. We need to quickly change and appreciate how intellectual property can leverage, can convert our research output into sustainable solutions, into sustainable, into products, and into resolving societal problems while ensuring our institutions are growing, are sustainable, and they remain relevant in the ever-changing market environment in Africa. So, as I mentioned before, that we'll be talking about two key concepts, intellectual property and research management. I took the liberty and discretion to assume that this lecture is not your first encounter with this subject of intellectual property. It's not the first time you hear about intellectual property. However, given the context that we are going to discuss, allow me to point out a few things about intellectual property. In the slide that you see, it just summarizes the aspects that fall within the umbrella of intellectual property. Primarily, what I've seen over the years through my engagement with academic institutions and universities, mostly we talk about patents. Mostly we talk about innovation, but there is a whole array of other subsets of intellectual property that, in one or another, are also part of what we do in our university settings, research and teaching. You can mention about industrial designs, whether you go to engineering department, you go to traditional knowledge. We have enjoyed the dance here, right? That is part of traditional cultural expressions, one of the cultural heritage. That is part of intellectual property. We have also plant varieties, new plant varieties in the field of agriculture, research in agriculture, which points out about new plant varieties which are resistant to certain types of hazardous environment or pesticides. You can also talk about copyright. This is a big thing. We call it a sleeping giant in Africa. Now we see the artistry industry growing, and we see now more and more appreciation that the field of art can be a profession. And we have schools, colleges who are teaching, researching on arts and culture. This is part of the IP as well. So we can mention a long list of subsets that falls within the intellectual property realm. What I would like to summarize is that there is nothing which is left out from intellectual property as long as it is a result of human ingenuity, intellectual ingenuity. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to our commandant of the National Defense Force about the dimensions of intellectual property in the context of national security. In the US, every patent which is filed in the US, the national security have got what we call the first right of refusal. Because as long as it has dimensions of national security, then the Department of Defense will have the first right to acquire that invention. So there is a link of intellectual property and national security. So we can talk about many fields. As long as there is creativity, innovation, we see intellectual property coming up and playing a role. So it's a no man's land. What you put on, your glasses, the phone you're using, the clothes you're putting on, the watch you're putting on, the mic I'm using, is a result of creativity. It's a creative idea. So we are surrounded by intellectual property works, intellectual property assets, and it befits for the universities to consider how our research management will take into account intellectual property in a manner that will generate value in a manner that will generate solutions that address some of the societal needs and problems that we are facing. How about the research management? I've been to a number of universities in Africa, and I can see the concentration of research management. How is it understood? And why maybe we are missing the intellectual property dimensions out of it. In most universities, you'll come to realize research management is technically or essentially a research fund management. They deal with the research funds. How they get the funds, how they distribute the funds, period. But what are we getting out of research undertakings? So my approach in this lecture in terms of research management, I'll be referring to the entire chain of mobilizing financial resources to fund research, guiding the research process to make sure that we get the best out of it, and also dealing with what we call commercialization or translation of research findings into usable solutions. And at that stage, my approach is to point out in all stages of research management, when you solicit funds, when the research department is looking for funders, at that early stage, when there is no research, is negotiation of funding arrangements, it's crucial that issues of intellectual property are put on the table. I'm serving as the Chief Corporate Counsel of the University of Dar es Salaam. I know sometimes how difficult this is to negotiate, because the funding terms would come and would insist that, okay, we give you money and whatever comes out of it is ours. Now you have a big problem, because you're dealing with researchers now who wants money in the form of per diem honorarium, and you lawyer come and say, wait a minute, we need to negotiate the terms of ownership of intellectual property. In some cases, researchers will not understand the broader interests at the institutional or individual level. But my point is, research management, which takes into account the entire trail of how you look for funds, how you administer funds, and how you monitor research progression, at all those stages, it's important that issues of intellectual property are taken on board. Because if we miss at the beginning, it will be very, very difficult to renegotiate at a point where the outcomes are already there. There is an invention, there is a solution, now we see the business opportunities. It becomes very difficult. So it's important from the very beginning for research managers to appreciate that it's crucial to negotiate the IP framework in the collaboration very early when they engage with the negotiation. How about during the progression of research? What is the practice in our universities? What I've seen in most of our university setting is once you have a research project going on, there is a requirement of reporting progress. Reporting progress. It's not a bad idea, because you want to see whether that money is actually used. But in the process, there is no any regulation of amount of disclosure that you ask the researcher to do, the principal investigator or other investigators. So what has come out to be in most cases is we disclose every stage, everything, and later when the research project has been completed, then you go and you want to apply for a patent. The National IP Office will tell you, oh, this is already in the public domain, because you are the one who disclosed it, because there is a threshold of timeline for you, once you disclose, to apply for a patent. So my point here is we need to relook in terms of how we manage tracking research project without compromising the potential or possibility of applying for a patent down the line during the research process. Later, then you have the research product. We assume now we have the workable solution, the market is there. How do you negotiate? How do you engage with the industry? The big problem we have in research management is that we start to engage with potential users when in our thoughts we consider everything is all set. Not realizing that the moment we realize there is a potential for innovation, for invention, that is the exact time we need to engage with the industry. Because at that time, you can also reorient it to fit in what is exactly needed in the industry. Of course, at that level, we normally encourage you sign NDA, non-disclosure agreement, that I share this information in confidence. So we move together from what we call a raw solution or a product into a usable solution or a product in the market. So from the whole trail, looking for funds, managing the funds, getting the update in terms of the research progression, and finally when we commercialize, it's critical and important for intellectual property to be high in the consideration. So, having said that, it's important we deep dive a little bit into the nexus between research management and the intellectual property. And my thesis here is there is a strong and inseparable link between the research management and the intellectual property. Research, in its purest form, creates knowledge. It creates knowledge. However, knowledge that is not protected, knowledge that is not translated or utilized, often remain unused. I was in Zimbabwe a week ago on 18th. We had an interesting discussion in terms of the many research which are in the shelves, libraries of the university. So the project was, can we set our resources in terms of checking what better solution we have in research which is already done, and how we can engage with proper intellectual property experts to tap value from many research findings which are currently in the shelves, whether in the research reports, in theses, dissertations, or just policy briefs. And the consensus was we need to look in terms of how we do our things so that we can take the best out of the research and output that is coming out of research. So the key questions or critical questions are, how do we ensure that our laboratories, if they're equipped, and classrooms, do not merely produce theses and dissertations, but solutions in the form of IP assets, tradable solutions that can be scaled up for industrial and societal use. How can we do that? How can intellectual property help us to do that? How can intellectual property support universities in moving from what we consider to be periphery role to the epicenter of the African innovation system as contemplated by the AU instruments, including the AU Agenda 2063? What measures, what movements we need to make? What's the mode of engagement which we need to do in the current setting? Now, within Africa, as my topic says, we've got setbacks and prospects. As we say, if you talk about setbacks and you don't propose solutions, then you become part of the setbacks. And I don't want to be part of that. I try to the best I can to provide solutions, but it's important also we appreciate what are the challenges and the setbacks that we are currently facing in Africa. And I'll point out 4 setbacks. And this is based on the fact that there is a promise within what is going on in Africa, but the pathway or the journey to achieve the promise is not free from obstacles, and how we are going to surmount these obstacles. Number 1, in the form of setbacks, is the whole issue of resource constraints. Resource constraints. How much do we reserve for research? How much do we serve for research? This is a continental issue. There is a promise at AU that at least, was it 1% of the budget for R&D? But very few countries are living to this promise. And as the saying goes, if you don't have good eggs, you can't have a good omelette. So that's the effect which happens. How much do we save for research? When you look at the research funding landscape, you find most of the universities are still heavily reliant on external funding, which they come with an agenda. And we have our agenda, the African we want. We've got our issues. We've got our problems, which we need to address them. Now, in the absence of having appropriate funding arrangement, it will be very difficult to come up with a solution that address what we call African context issues, contextual issues that face Africa. So we have got a resource constraint. Number two, structural challenges. Now, in the context of intellectual property, we've come to realize, I did a thorough research, and I've been to some universities trying to share with them the experience and formulate the approaches and the institutional strategies. You'll find that many African universities lack well-developed intellectual property management framework. So it's still coming up in a number of universities. I can compare my time